We'll now commence with the daily routine. Presenting and reading of petitions. Recognize the honourable member for Lunenburg West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg leave to present a petition. It's a petition to maintain the Upper Branch Road, the operative clause of which is the Upper Branch Road is a safety hazard due to substandard construction, crumbling asphalt and deep potholes. Water, snow, and darkness hide the hazards that cause vehicle damage and accidents. Goes on to say a number of other things about that road, and I've affixed my signature to it.
The petition actually has to have some form of an ask or request in the operative clause, so...
But ask it to be paved.
Well,
repaved,
we
sorry.
could ask for that to be read then, please, into the record.
Do you want me to keep on going?
I want you to read the part that has the ask.
Okay. Whereas many seniors and others are fearful of driving on this damaged road and poorly constructed road, residents, relatives, and friends frequently restrict travel due to the poor road conditions. Snowplows are not capable of properly removing snow from the contorted and damaged road. Numerous vehicles have severely damaged and suffered ongoing exceptional stress and wear due to contact with potholes, depressions, ridges, and missing sections of asphalt. We, the undersigned residents.
Right. That's the part we need.
You might as well hear it all. You might as well hear it all. We, the undersigned residents of the Upper Branch and Area District, request that the Upper Branch Road be upgraded to a safe and maintainable standard. Our safety, economy, and daily transportation depend on the proper maintenance of this critical roadway.
Thank you very much. The petition is tabled. Presenting of reports of committee. Recognize the honourable member for Colchester and Muscataba Valley.
Yeah. Madam Speaker, as chair of Friday's meeting of the Private and Local Bills Committee, I am directed to report that the committee has met and considered the following bill. Bill number 90, an act to amend Chapter 69 of the Acts of 1992, the Nova Scotia Provincial Exhibition Commission Act. The committee recommends this bill to the favourable consideration of the House without amendment.
The report is tabled. Ordered that this bill be referred to the Committee of the whole House on Bills. I recognize the Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As Chair of the Committee of Law Amendments, I am directed to report that the committee has met and considered the following bills. Bill number 81, Bill number 82, Bill number 84, Bill number 87, Bill number 88. The committee recommends these bills to the favourable consideration of the House without amendment.
The report is tabled. Ordered that these bills be referred to the Committee of the whole House on Bills. Recognize the Honourable Minister of Justice.
Madam Speaker, as Chair of the Committee of the Law Amendments, I am directed to report that the committee has met and considered the following bill. Bill 86, an act to provide the protection for the New Page Port Hawkesbury pension plans. The committee recommends this bill to the favourable consideration of the House with certain amendments.
The report is tabled. Ordered that these bills be referred to the Committee of the whole House on Bills. Tabling of reports, regulations, and other papers. Recognize the Honourable Minister of Justice.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. My capacity as the Attorney General and pursuant to Section 51 of the Judiciary Act, I hereby beg leave to table revisions to the civil procedure rules that were made in accordance with the Judiciary Act by the Judge of the Supreme Court of Nova Scotia on May 10th, 2012.
The report is tabled. Statements by ministers. Notices of motion. Government notices of motion. Okay. Introduction of bills. Notices of motions. Recognize the honourable member for Richmond.
Madame la Présidente, à une date ultérieure, je demanderai l'adoption de la résolution suivante. Attendu que les Red Caps, équipe de baseball du Tigre, a une longue et fière histoire au niveau local, provincial et national, et attendu que l'équipe, créée en 1947, est intronisée au temple de la renommée des sports de la Nouvelle-Écosse, a accueilli 210 joueurs différents, a remporté 40 championnats atlantiques, provinciaux et locaux de l'Association du baseball amateur de Richmond. En 2006, a remporté le championnat national dans la division 35+. En 2011, a remporté la médaille d'argent dans la division tir 1 44+, et a remporté le tir 2 dans la division 35+ au championnat national, et détient le record de 12 championnats consécutifs de l'Association du baseball amateur de Richmond, soit de 1999 à 2010. Attendu que du 20 au 22 juillet, les joueurs actuels et les anciens joueurs se réuniront pour célébrer le 65e anniversaire des Red Caps, ainsi que le retour des équipes participant aux divisions Tir 1 44+, et Tir 2 35+, aux championnats nationaux qui auront lieu plus tard cet été à Summerside, à l'île du Prince-Édouard. Par conséquent, il est résolu que les membres de cette Assemblée se joignent à moi pour féliciter les Red Caps de Petit-de-Gras pour leur 65e anniversaire et pour leur souhaiter succès continu. Madame la Présidente, je demande l'adoption de cette résolution sans préavis et sans débat. Madam Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Petit-de-Gras Red Caps baseball team has a long, proud history at the local, provincial, and national levels, and whereas the Red Caps, first created in 1947 and now enshrined in the Nova Scotia Sport Hall of Fame, have seen 210 different players, won 40 Richmond Amateur Baseball Association, RABA, provincial and Atlantic championships. In 2006, won national championships in the 35+ division. In 2011, won silver in the Tier 1 44+ division and the Tier 2 championship in the 35+ at nationals, along with a record 12 consecutive RABA championships from 1999 to 2010. And whereas from July 20th to 22nd, both current and former players will gather to celebrate the Red Caps' 65th anniversary, along with a return of the Tier 1 44+ and the Tier 2 35+ teams at the Nationals later this summer in Summerside, PEI. Therefore, be it resolved that members of the House of Assembly join me in congratulating the Petit-de-Gras Red Caps on their 65th anniversary and wish the team and players continued success. And Madam Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date, I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Conrad Michael Farrell from Sydney Forks has been an active member of Branch 151 Legion in East Bay for the past 56 years, and whereas since receiving the Meritus Service Award in 1993, Conrad Farrell has been a conscientious, hard-working Legion member who never hesitates to volunteer for the most arduous of tasks. And whereas Conrad Farrell acts as mentor to everyone involved at Branch 151 by spreading his wisdom, knowledge, and stories to everyone. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly congratulate Conrad Michael Farrell as he continues his dedicated service to all his comrades and to his community. And Mr. Speaker, I would request waiver of notice. Madam Speaker, I would request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Recognize the honourable member for Pictou East.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day, I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the 38th Annual Provincial Volunteer Award Ceremony was held in Halifax on April the 2nd, 2012, with over 70 awards being presented to outstanding Nova Scotia volunteers. And whereas Tom Foley of Westville, Pictou County, a retired school teacher, was honored with a Provincial Volunteer Award on behalf of the town of Westville to honor him for his many volunteer contributions. And whereas this Provincial Volunteer Award is an acknowledgement of Tom Foley's extensive history of volunteer service to his community of Westville, to the Pictou County Food Bank, to his church, county, and province. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the Nova Scotia House of Assembly congratulate Tom Foley on his Provincial Volunteer Award and thank him for his many years of volunteer service. Mr. Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Recognize the honourable member for Kings West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Valley Stationers Limited has not only managed to stay in business for 50 years, it has grown and become a leader in Nova Scotia and across Canada. And whereas the business was established by Douglas Morrison as a supplier of office stationery products to local businesses, and today provides all of the products for modern office, distributing them through offices in Kentville, Halifax, and New Glasgow. And whereas Ian and Lee joined the business and continued to follow this legacy of commitment to the customer and build success on repeat business, and as Ian told the Nova Scotia Business Journal, we're big enough to serve, small enough to care, and it stands true today. Therefore, be it resolved that the House of Assembly recognize and congratulate Valley Stationers on the occasion of their 50th anniversary and wish them every success in the future. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. I recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Paul Griffin was appointed President and CEO for Marine Atlantic for a 5-year term, and whereas Paul has demonstrated his leadership skills as interim President and CEO, and his experience will be a tremendous asset to the corporation and the hundreds of people employed with passenger and commercial marine transportation service between the island of Newfoundland and the province of Nova Scotia. And whereas with a revitalized Marine Atlantic and with Paul at the helm, the people of Cape Breton North and all Nova Scotians look forward to a prosperous and productive relationship with Marine Atlantic. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly join me in congratulating Paul Griffin on his new appointment. And Madam Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. I recognize the honourable member for Colchester, Musquodoboit Valley.
On behalf, Madam Speaker, of the member for Truro Bible Hill, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Lech Kravonos is the academic chair of the School of Access at the Nova Scotia Community College in Truro, as well as a graduate of the MED program at UPEI, and whereas Lech Kravonos was one of only 2 Canadians chosen to receive the prestigious 2012 Gary Phelan Excellence in Leadership Award and Scholarship, based on his outstanding participation in the Foundation Academy, as well as his contribution to the overall Academy experience. And whereas Lech Kravonos received his award at the Chair Academy's 21st Annual International Leadership Conference that took place from March 26th to the 29th in Atlanta, Georgia. While there, he also received a scholarship to attend an Advanced Leadership Academy to further his leadership education. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia Legislature congratulates Lech Kravonos on being the recipient of this very prestigious 2012 Gary Phelan Excellence in Leadership Award and thanks him for his dedication and outstanding leadership in the field of education. Madam Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There's been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Recognize the honourable member for Colchester North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas rural Nova Scotians for many years have depended on the members of volunteer fire brigades to keep their families and properties safe from fire, and whereas training, fundraising, first aid, recruitment, and public relations are only a few of the many additional responsibilities of the members of the fire brigade, and whereas firefighters seldom receive the accolades which they deserve, most brigades do hold a banquet each year to thank all of those members and to present special honours. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly congratulate Bob Davis of the Debert Fire Brigade, Colchester North, for receiving his 25-year service award. Madam Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. I now recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And Madam Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Laurel Martel from Albert Bridge recently recorded her first full-length CD called When It Rains, and whereas Laurel is an active participant in the local Cape Breton music scene for years, and whereas Laurel has performed on just about every stage in the area as a lead or backup singer with many bands, therefore be resolved that all members of this House of Assembly congratulate Laurel Martel on her recent CD and wish her the very best for years to come. Mr. Speaker, I hereby, Madam Speaker, sorry about that. Madam Speaker, I request a waiver of notice and passage without debate. And by the way, you are better looking than Mr. Speaker any day.
No comment on that, although I wouldn't argue with you. There has been a request for a waiver. Is it agreed? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. I now recognize the honourable member for Kings North.
Madam Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Jolly Workers have been serving the community of Black Rock for 80 years by holding countless benefits, breakfasts, suppers, and other activities which have benefited Black Rock and the surrounding community, and whereas Jean Calkin, Cora Crocker, Evelyn Doherty, Marjorie Pinio, Joyce Bryden, Marion Baltzer, Eva Turner, Grace Baltzer, and Ida Gould all worked in the hall in the early days before they had running water, and water had to be carried in to wash dishes. And whereas the Black Rock Jolly Workers will be honoring these 9 former members and celebrating their 80th anniversary at a special tea at the Black Rock Community Hall on May 19th, 2012, therefore be it resolved that all members of the House of Assembly recognize the dedicated work of the Jolly Workers, both past and present, and congratulate them on their many years of service. Madam Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Recognize the honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Madam Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Ryan Haley of Hammonds Plains graduated today, May 14th, 2012 from Acadia University with a Bachelor of Applied Science and a Certificate of Applied Science. And whereas Ryan received the Chipman Medal, which is awarded to the graduating student from the Faculty of Pure and Applied Science, whose overall average is closest to that of the Governor General's medalist, and also received the Mounts Medal in Engineering, awarded to the students receiving the Certificate of Applied Science, who has the highest average in the program. And whereas Ryan was also awarded the Frederick H. Sexton Scholarship in Engineering, the Engineers Nova Scotia Award, and the Nova Scotia Power Centennial Scholarship. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of this House of Assembly congratulate Ryan Haley on his degree, his certificate, his medals, and his awards and scholarships, and wish him continued success in his academic endeavours. Madam Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. I recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I hereby give notice that on a future date I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Sam Caldwell, a North Sydney defenseman, just finished his 4th and final season of junior hockey, having played 3.5 seasons with the Truro Bearcats. And whereas in January, Sam was traded to the Woodstock Slammers, and he scored the game-winning goal in the 3-2 win over Nepean Raiders in the championship game to win the Fred Page Cup Eastern Canadian Junior A Hockey Championship. And whereas Sam and the Slammers represented Eastern Canada in the Royal Bank Cup at the National Junior A Tournament and came second to the Penticton Bees by 1 goal. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly congratulate Sam Caldwell and the Slammers for a great year and many memories in Junior A hockey. And Madam Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. I recognize the honourable member for Colchester Musquodoboit Valley.
Madam Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Carroll's Corner Community Centre hosts a wide variety of programs, including weekly card parties, dances, the 4CY Youth Group, as well as a range of community events. And whereas the community centre is operated by a strong and dedicated board of directors who have recently been active with a series of facility upgrades in such areas as heating, lighting, siding, paint, the water system, and the windows. And whereas, building on the work over many years of Jackie and the late John George, the recently reconfigured board under Chair Meredy Rankin has established a solid and productive relationship with the Halifax Regional Municipality and a newly reinvigorated relationship with the community as a whole. Therefore, be it resolved that the Nova Scotia House of Assembly congratulates all those involved with the Carroll's Corner Community Centre on the ongoing enhancement of community life which the centre continues to provide. Madam Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favour say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. I recognize the honourable member for Yarmouth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Calvin Lawrence, originally from the Yarmouth area, began his boxing career in his home province, becoming the Nova Scotia champion while serving as a police officer in Halifax. And whereas Calvin Lawrence, who had a 10-1 record, proceeded to win both the Eastern Canadian Championship and the Canadian heavyweight title, and won a bronze medal at the 1974 Winter Games, which led to an invitation to participate in the 1976 Olympics in Montreal, for which he was unable to get the time off to train and chose instead to focus on his career and eventually joined the Royal Canadian Mounted Police. And whereas on May 5th, 2012, Calvin Lawrence was inducted into the Yarmouth Town and County Sports Heritage Association's Hall of Fame. Therefore, be it resolved that members of this House of Assembly congratulate Calvin Lawrence on being inducted into the Yarmouth Town and County Sports Heritage Association's Hall of Fame and recognize him for his impressive accomplishments in boxing. Madam Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and pass without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favour say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. I recognize the honourable member for Hants West.
Madam Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Minister of Energy is steadfast about his government's bite-the-bullet higher electricity bills plan, and whereas Nova Scotia Power's latest application for 3% rate increases in 2013 and 2014 respectively will take a total of $123.85 million from the pockets of Nova Scotians. And whereas if approved by the UARB, residential customers will be forced to pay an extra $34.8 million in 2013, another $37.1 million in 2014, for a total of slightly more than $72 million. Therefore, be it resolved that all members of this House of Assembly encourage the Premier and his Minister of Energy to get a grip on their bite-the-bullet electricity plan and understand Nova Scotians do not have millions of extra dollars to pay for their electricity bills. And Madam Speaker, I will request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? I hear several noes. The motion is tabled. I recognize the honourable member for Digby Annapolis.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on Thursday night, May the 10th, 2012, a serious rainstorm in western Nova Scotia washed out a bridge on Highway 217 that is the only route in and out of Digby Neck and Islands for 2,000 people. And whereas within hours, the Department of Transport and Infrastructure crews from Digby, Annapolis, and Middleton went to work around the clock, first rerouting traffic through Nova Scotia Power's Windmill Road, which is 6 kilometres through the woods, only one lane, and traffic traveling at 15 kilometres per hour. And whereas the department's crews and other local contractors went to work, they took out what was left of the old bridge, started rebuilding, and by May the 15th, this new bridge will be replaced. And they are doing this amazing and speedy rebuilding by working around the clock non-stop. Therefore, be it resolved, the members of the House of Assembly recognize this amazing and speedy job these workers have done to help the stranded people on Digby Neck and Islands, and also Nova Scotia Power for providing a temporary route through their Digby Neck Windmill Road. Mr. Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favour say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. I recognize the honourable member for Halifax, Clayton Park.
Mr. Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on May 2nd, 2012, the Halifax Mainland North Volunteer Recognition Committee held their annual Community Champion Awards dinner to recognize outstanding volunteers who consistently dedicate their time and talents to improving the lives of others. And whereas Francis MacDonald has always been an outgoing, involved volunteer who gives his all to community causes like the Build It Right organization, which after 3 years successfully lobbied government and gained public support for a world-class recreation centre, which became a reality with the opening of the Canada Games Centre in Clayton Park. And whereas Francis is always the first to help others in need, has been president of the Halifax Clayton Park Liberal Association, and since 2008 has raised more than $19,000 for Feed Nova Scotia through events and fundraising with his staff at Home Life Atlantic Realty. Therefore, be it resolved that members of this House congratulate Francis MacDonald on receiving a 2012 Community Champion Award for his tremendous contributions to his community and province. Thank him for his tremendous contribution to Thank him for his tremendous contribution to his community and province, and wish him every success in the future. Madam Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favour say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Recognize the honourable member for Colchester North.
Madam Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Nova Scotia's fire brigades are made up of individuals who are dedicated to serving others, and those brigades are actively recruiting new members at all times, and whereas firefighters contribute hard work, skills, and time, often risking their lives, and they have taken on the role of first responder and deal with incidents of great emotional stress. And whereas firefighters seldom receive the accolades which they deserve, most fire brigades do hold a banquet to thank their members and to present special awards. Therefore, be it resolved, all members of the House of Assembly congratulate Joe Slack of Great Village and District Fire Brigade, Colchester North, for receiving the Officer of the Year award. Madam Speaker, I request waiver of notice, passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favour say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Recognize the honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Madam Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the Canadian Junior Hockey League named Bedford resident Theodore Hanna the Scholastic Player of the Year at the site of the RBC Cup National Championships in Humboldt, Saskatchewan on Saturday, May 12, 2012, and whereas the defenseman with the Carleton Place Canadians of the Junior A Central Canada Hockey League was selected from among 10 finalists, one from each league in the CJHL, and will receive a $5,000 scholarship. And whereas Theo had also been selected to play hockey for the Ivy League's Amherst College in Massachusetts and will head there in September to study and play hockey, therefore be it resolved the members of this House congratulate Theo Hanna on his award and on his admittance to Amherst College and wish him well in all his endeavours, both scholastic and sporting. Madam Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate. I have one for Andrew.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favour say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. I recognize the honourable member for Yarmouth.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the remainder of the 1986-87 season saw the Yarmouth Olin Exports Senior C hockey team struggling for a win and facing elite competition as they hosted the Maritime Championships, where they posted 3 consecutive wins in round-robin play to advance to the championship game. And whereas under the guidance of Coach Paul Boudreau, the team consisting of John Murphy, Paul Hatfield, Chris Newell, Rob Semple, Wayne Thibault, Maurice Monroe, Alan Nickerson, Trent Nickerson, Sean Saunier, Eldon Young, Rob Muse, Earl Hope, Paul Jackard, Phil LeBlanc, Richie Hubbard, Elroy D'Entremont, Kurt Gowdy, Chris Gowdy, Bill Spence, John Culiti, Kevin Locke, Danny LeBlanc, and Cliff Hood Jr. won the championship after defeating Moncton by a score of 2-1. And whereas on May 5th, 2012, the Yarmouth Olin Exports Senior C hockey team was inducted into the Yarmouth Town and County Sports Heritage Association's Hall of Fame, therefore be it resolved the members of this House of Assembly congratulate the Yarmouth Olin Exports Senior C hockey team on being inducted into the Yarmouth Town and County Sports Heritage Association's Hall of Fame and thank them for such an exciting moment in Yarmouth sports history. Madam Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favour say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. I recognize the Honourable Premier on an introduction.
Well, thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to introduce to the House of Assembly some guests who are seated in the gallery today. I'm pleased to introduce the BIA delegation from the state of Sharjah in the United Arab Emirates, including His Excellency Sultan Al Mualla, who is the Director General of Sharjah, Mr. Abdul Mahmoud, an official with the municipality of Sharjah, Mr. Khaled Al-Haramel, who's the CEO of BIA, and Mr. Najib Fairs, the Vice President of Marketing, Communications and Awareness. The delegation, Madam Speaker, is visiting Nova Scotia to learn more about our province's solid waste resource management program and technology, and I think to exchange and make presentations also to the provinces on behalf of the work that they are currently doing, which I understand is very advanced in this area. So we're very pleased to have them with us, and I would ask the members of the House of Assembly to welcome our guests both to Nova Scotia and to the House of Assembly.
We welcome all our guests in the gallery today, and we hope that you enjoy today's proceedings and certainly enjoy Nova Scotia. I now recognize the Honourable Minister of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I hereby give notice that on a future day, I should move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas the province is currently hosting delegates from the United Arab Emirates, including officials from BIHA, the environmental agency in Sharjah, whereas this visit is part of government's ongoing efforts to strengthen Nova Scotia's international partnership with the UAE, and whereas this government remains committed to working with international partners to help Nova Scotia businesses become more globally competitive and innovative. Therefore, be it resolved that the UAE delegation receive the warm welcome of the House of Assembly and be congratulated on its work in helping the environment and strengthening international relations with the province of Nova Scotia. Madam Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favour say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. I now recognize the honourable member for Halifax Clayton Park.
Madam Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on May 2nd, 2012, the Halifax Mainland North Volunteer Recognition Committee held their annual Community Champion Awards dinner to recognize outstanding volunteers who consistently dedicate their time and talents to improving the lives of others. And whereas Don Allen, a Korean War veteran and Nova Scotia's representative for the Korean Veterans Association of Canada, was actively involved with HRM in the renaming of a section on Jubilee Road to Veterans Memorial Lane and played a key role in the establishment of the Korean Memorial Park and the Stratford Way Gardens in Clayton Park West. And whereas Don has coordinated chapel services every Sunday at the Camp Hill Veterans Memorial Hospital for the past 10 years and Remembrance Day services each year at the Korean Memorial Park and continues to coordinate trips to Korea for veterans and spouses. Therefore, be it resolved that members of this House congratulate Don Allen on receiving a 2012 Community Champion Award for his leadership to ensure that we remember the sacrifice of those who served during the Korean War and thank him for his tremendous contribution to his community and province. Madam Speaker, I request waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favour say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Now recognize the honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Madam Speaker, I would like to move this resolution on behalf of the member for Dartmouth East. Madam Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I shall move the adoption on the following resolution. Whereas Seamus David's Pub opened on March 21st, 2012 in Dartmouth, and whereas Seamus David's Pub is owned and operated by Bev and Stephen Hines and is named after their son and future proprietor, Seamus David. And whereas Seamus David's Pub has quickly become a popular meeting spot in Dartmouth, therefore be it resolved that members of this House of Assembly congratulate the Hines family on their success with Seamus David's Pub and wish them great success in the months and years to come. Madam Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. I recognize the honourable member for Richmond.
Madam Speaker, I hereby give notice on a future day I shall move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas on Sunday, May 6th, I joined veterans, legionnaires, and community members at Royal Canadian Legion Branch 43 in Port Hawkesbury for the addition of names to the Veterans Memorial Wall. And whereas the Veterans Memorial Wall was started and finished by veteran Stuart MacDonald with the intent of getting all of the youth from Port Hawkesbury and surrounding area that fought in both World Wars, Korea, and all those that served through NATO, recognized with their names displayed on a wall at the Legion. Whereas with the help of Joan McIntyre, 40 additional names were added to the wall in a ceremony that included a supper and dance. Therefore, be it resolved that members of the House of Assembly join me in congratulating veteran Stuart MacDonald, Joan McIntyre, and all the members of Port Hawkesbury Legion Branch 43 for their efforts to forever recognize those who fought and served our country in World War I, World War II, Korea, and NATO through their permanent Veterans Memorial Wall. And Madam Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. I recognize the honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Madam Speaker, I would like to read this resolution on behalf of the member for Dartmouth East. Madam Speaker, I hereby give notice that on a future day I should move the adoption of the following resolution. Whereas Dartmouth boxer Custio Clayton is a member of the City of Lakes Boxing Club training under coach Gary Johnson, and whereas Clayton is a 6-time Canadian amateur champion, and whereas Clayton qualified in Rio de Janeiro on Saturday, May 12, 2012 to compete for Canada at this summer's London Olympics, therefore be it resolved that members of this House of Assembly wish Custio Clayton success at the London Olympics representing Canada, Nova Scotia, and Dartmouth, and wish him well on his future professional career post-Olympics. Madam Speaker, I ask for waiver of notice and passage without debate.
There has been a request for waiver. Is it agreed? All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Now recognize the Honourable Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, please call Resolution 985, Museums, Archives Funding.
Now call Resolution number 985. Recognize the honourable member for Lunenburg.
752.
There's some confusion about whether or not the resolution is called correctly. Perhaps we can do that again. I now recognize the Honourable Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you very much. I was advised to call two resolutions, resolution number 953 and resolution number 985, and perhaps we could proceed with one of them and we will find out what the second one is.
Make the call. Just tell me which one you need. I recognize the honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. We were advised earlier that the resolutions to be called tonight would be 953, 752, and Resolution 86, if that is of assistance to the Deputy Government House Leader.
I will now call Resolution 953, since we're all in agreement on that one. I recognize the honourable member for Kings North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm glad we got that clarified. I'm happy to rise in my place today to speak to Resolution 953, something which I read to this House last week, and it deals with CAP sites, federally funded community access program sites, and provincially funded sites which have been in existence in this province and across Canada since 1995. And Madam Speaker, you may be well aware that in Nova Scotia there are and have been for the last while about 209 campsites spread in communities from end to end in this province, in the larger centres, in tiny places, and all are important. And the federal government, Madam Speaker, has last year, in any case, in the year fiscal year 2011-2012, funded campsites to the tune of, in this province, to the tune of $740,000 and $263. That was kind of matched or combined with some provincial support of $340,000 from the government of Nova Scotia. Funding which made it possible to keep these 209 centres open and running. And I guess the reason that I'm standing in my place to talk about this is, which I think everyone in this House knows, is that the federal government, Madam Speaker, and it's hard for me to hear in the noise with the noise in this House.
Order. The honourable member for Kings North has the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I was saying, the federal government has decided to discontinue its support for this funding, and I think that that's unfortunate. And in fact, the announcement of the discontinuation of that funding was delivered in a rather cynical way late in the evening of Thursday, April the 5th. And you'll remember, as all of my colleagues in this House will remember, that was the evening before a long weekend that began with Good Friday. The federal government delivered a letter, sent a letter to campsite officials across the country advising them that the program, which had been in place for more than 10 years, would be discontinued. And I think that, Madam Speaker, that decision tends to neglect, to fail to recognize the value of those community access program sites. These are valuable community resources, Madam Speaker. They contribute to economic development by giving everyone in the community access to information. They're an important social resource because they allow people to connect with family and friends, to make contact with the services they need throughout the community, in fact, throughout the world. And I think in many cases what they've done, Madam Speaker, is help introduce particularly older Nova Scotians to the world of computer technology and help them become more comfortable with a modern means of being in touch with each other. And Madam Speaker, they've certainly created a means of access for economically disadvantaged or poor Nova Scotians. For those people who may be temporarily poor because they're unemployed and don't have the means to provide themselves with that kind of computer access. And those people who are receiving income assistance or maybe who are living on minimum wage have found community access centres one of the important ways of staying in touch with the wider world. And I think, Madam Speaker, people use these centres for a variety of means. Some people might use these centres because they need to do banking. Others might find it one of the ways that they can communicate with government, perhaps to file their income tax. It can be a way for people to access health information, which many of us might do from our homes. It can become a way for those people who are unemployed to actually conduct a meaningful job search and to stay in touch with the range of jobs that might be available in a community. And certainly, and I don't think this can be downplayed at all and shouldn't be, it becomes a way for individuals to maintain family and social context. And I think, it's important for us to understand that in the kind of world we live in, where families have become dispersed, where individuals who may have started out in one part of the country now live in another, that the internet, social media has become one of the ways in which we communicate with each other. And that sense of being in touch with the people we care about, with the people who matter to us, is one of the ways in which we measure our well-being and in which we're able to participate in a full and meaningful way in our community. And at a very practical, in a very practical way, Madam Speaker, even young people who may be quite computer literate may be part of a family that cannot afford a computer, and this may become one of the ways through being able to access a CAP site at a library or some other community centre they're able to do their homework. And certainly, Madam Speaker, this has been in a general sense.
Order, please. It's becoming increasingly hard to hear. The chatter is very loud. If you could just keep it down a little bit or perhaps take it out of the chamber. The Honourable Member for Kings North has the floor.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Encouraging computer literacy is an important goal in our society. It continues to be an important objective, and it's one that we have not yet completed. You know, it's one of the things that has been documented regularly, but has been certainly documented and publicized since the federal government announced its intention to discontinue this program, is that there were 500,000 hours of CAP site internet time logged in the fiscal year that just ended. And the usage numbers over the years since 1995, when the program was implemented, have either remained stable or escalated. There's been no indication that the interest in this program has diminished. But, Madam Speaker, one of the facts is that without federal support, some of these, maybe all of these, but certainly some of these community access program sites will close. And I think in the area that I represent, where there are CAP sites in Kingsport or Canning, in Kentville or Port Williams, of those people who make use of these resources on a regular basis, some who have learned and are learning to use the internet resources through those locations. When I think of those cases, I certainly understand that this is an important resource. And it's not only in Kings North, Madam Speaker, that these are important issues. If one was in Barce's Corner in the middle of our province or in Pugwash, one would also be wondering how they were going to access resources like this. If one were in Lewisburg, one might be asking about resources like this. And you know, my colleague, the member for Pictou East, was mentioning to me just earlier today that he recalls his own time living in the Lewisburg area, where the children of people who worked in fish plants were primary users of CAP sites in the local library, using the CAP site as a way to get their homework done, as a way to stay in touch with the world, as a way to sort of get a leg up in the world when their parents couldn't afford to offer that directly through their own home. And, you know, this is not, of course, CAP sites are not only about simply access to computers. They're about all of those things which make it difficult for people who have less income to get access to the resources they need. For somebody who has low income, they may not have good access to telephone services. They may not have adequate transportation. They may not be able to afford even to buy a computer, let alone to pay internet fees. And so this becomes one of the ways that those disadvantaged people can access the world. And for people who run libraries, for librarians and library technicians, the computers and the CAP sites that are located in those sites become an important part of the network of resources that libraries offer. And I think probably every member of this House is aware that there are pockets of people, maybe who are not experiencing issues with income, who don't have access to adequate internet because broadband internet has not yet reached every member of our community. In my own constituency of Kings North, there are a number of people who live on the North Mountain of Kings North, a number of people who live under the North Mountain who could well afford broadband internet services, but who cannot access them because technically they're just not, it's not yet possible to provide them. And those people also make use of CAP sites as a way to stay in touch with things that are important to them. Now, Madam Speaker, we haven't been inactive on this side of the House on this issue. We've committed ourselves to continue providing a provincial portion of this funding. We are hopeful that that funding will enable CAP sites to continue to do as much work as they can. And Mr. Eric Stackhouse, who's the Nova Scotia CAP chair, has been leading the provincial effort to reinstate the national funding. And Madam Speaker, I think we have to commend Mr. Stackhouse's work which has in the past actually been effective in discouraging federal intents to reduce or cut back or eliminate this program. And on our own side of the House, Madam Speaker, the Minister of Economic and Rural Development and Tourism has written his colleague in Ottawa, the Honourable Kristen Parady, Minister of Industry, encouraging Mr. Parady to rethink his position on this whole issue and pointed out the reasons that he should do that, some of which I've highlighted here today. I read a resolution in this House, Madam Speaker, just last week, asking my colleagues for the in the Progressive Conservative Party to do their part to help take up the cause with their federal, maybe not so progressive counterparts. And the member from Argyle, the member for West Hants, the member for Inverness, the member for Victoria the Lakes, the member for Cape Breton West and Cape Breton North, the member for Cumberland South, all of those members could certainly be helpful because obviously I would expect they would have better contacts than we might have on our side with some of those key people who might be able to help influence Mr. Parady and those people who have influence in the federal cabinet and the federal decision making regarding this issue, which is not significant when it's compared with many other things in terms of its financial cost, but which has a tremendous benefit for those people who are among the poorest among us. And again, Madam Speaker, I do want to say that while there are many more people in 2012 who have access to computer services and internet access in their own homes, that number has risen to 79%. And what that means, while that's an amazing number in a short time, it still means that there are 21% of Canadians who do not have computer access in their own homes. And I would suggest, Madam Speaker, that by and large, despite those people who don't have access because of gaps in broadband and the like, those 21% tend to be the people among us who need the largest hand up, who need to be given every tool they can to take part in the society of which they are entitled to be a part. And I think, Madam Speaker, that CAP sites provide one of the means of doing that. So I think at this point I've said what I intended to say, and I will take my seat, but I appreciate the opportunity to address this issue and to encourage all of us, and in fact to encourage Nova Scotians throughout the province to do their part in encouraging the federal government to encourage a reversal of this decision. And certainly, as I've said, I encourage my colleagues in the Progressive Conservative Party to lead the way in that effort. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. I now recognize the honourable member for Bedford Birch Cove.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. So, the CAP sites. Hey, better late than never. The CAP site program was started in 1995 at a time when the federal government was going through budget cuts, severe budget cuts, but they felt that this program was incredibly important to Canadians, to the Canadian economy, to job searches, etc. Back then, 40% of Canadian households had computers, 10% of those had internet. Today, 79% have internet. But that doesn't mean that the CAP site program should be cut. And in fact, I'm looking here at a letter to the editor of the Hants Journal. It says, Conservative government must restore CAP funding. Many Nova Scotians will be hurt by the Conservative government's decision to stop funding community access programs, CAP, in hundreds of communities. CAP sites are used for employment searches and to help seniors and students access government services online. Others rely on CAP to stay connected with family and friends. And staff at CAP sites provide computer training to individuals and businesses to help them take advantage of emerging technologies. The decision to stop funding this program will mean many low-income families will continue to be at an educational and economic disadvantage. I believe we need to do everything we can to convince the Harper government to restore the CAP funding and to do it now. And it is signed Jeff Regan, MP, Halifax West. So, because I always listen to my husband, I wanted to participate in today's debate, and in fact, I do believe I've read a resolution on this previously, because I believe that this is an important program. And in fact, the member for Halifax West's point that the decision to stop funding this program will mean many low-income families will continue to be at an educational and economic disadvantage is exactly my point. The people who are continuing to use these sites are often, well, they're often poor. They can't afford to have a computer and internet access at home. They're often elderly, or they're homeless, or they're unemployed, or they're travelers from out of town, and they just need a place to check in and let people know what's going on and find out what's going on in the world. And I have to say that I know people who use the CAP site to do their internet work. Not all of us have internet sites at home, and sometimes you're going through a period where you just can't afford it, or you're living in a place for a brief period of time. It doesn't make economic sense to set that up, and you have this particular service which has been helpful. You really have to ask yourself why the federal government chose right before a long weekend, a 4-day long weekend, to hack that program. You know that if it was a positive decision, they would have been out front with pictures and cameras and announcements, but instead they did it trying to fly underneath the radar. And in fact, some of the organizations who had their funding cut didn't even know about the cut right away because they weren't at work when it happened. Anybody who works in a rural community with small business or with low-income people knows that the CAP sites are particularly a problem. Losing the CAP sites is a problem. And significantly, the decision to chop this program was made without consultation. Nobody called up the CAP sites and said, is there a better way to do this? Is there something we can do? They never... according to an article from the Annapolis County Spectator, they were never consulted about this. And they've asked for discussions on how to adjust the program to meet government priorities. You have to ask yourself, what does the government think people are doing on those particular sites? We know from talking to CAP volunteers that people are looking for jobs online. CAP volunteers help seniors file for income tax. They help laid-off workers apply for EI online. And they work with community groups on projects that require online research or even the printing of the final project if they've been working on it. Some people come in and they have their resumes done up, and the CAP volunteers are actually helping them. They may need some assistance with literacy issues, and the CAP volunteers are doing that. That service is going to be lost without the funding from the federal government, which wasn't huge in per site, in terms of dollars. But what it was, it often paid to keep the heat on, to keep the lights on. We weren't paying the volunteers. We were talking about just actually running the computers and that kind of thing. If you look at the federal government's rationale for chopping this, they said that it launched, as I said, in 1995, but then they went on to say it's met its objectives. Well, what were those objectives? To help poor people find their jobs? Poor people are trying to still find jobs. Poor people are still trying to access programs. People are still trying to file for EI. They are still trying to file for their income tax on the cap sites. And so how they could conclude that their objectives have been met when in fact usage has continued to climb year over year is beyond me. For the federal government to say many more have access through their mobile devices, suggesting that, you know, and I believe it was a federal government minister who said, well, people can just get it on their iPhone. Well, lots of people don't have iPhones, lots of people don't have cell phones, and this program is penalizing them. It's ridiculous. Now, when I was in law amendments a while ago, I did ask, it wasn't law amendments, pardon me, it was budget estimates. I did ask the Minister for Communities, Culture and Heritage, would this government increase the funding to help make up the shortfall from the federal government? And we did not hear that they were going to increase their funding. So, once again, I would say that this government has it within their power to allocate resources to this needed program if the government wants it to continue. If the government feels this program is important, it can increase the money to it. Heaven knows I don't want to let the federal government off the hook, but if one believes that this program is important, there is something that can be done about it, and the government members have it within their power. As the leader of my party often says, this government doesn't have a revenue problem, it has a priority problem, and it could decide to make the cap sites a priority. So, now that I have complained that the NDP isn't funding the program and the Conservatives aren't funding the program, I think I've made my point, and I'll take my seat. Thank you.
The honourable member for Argyle.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I really don't know where to start on this one because there's so much to say, Madam Speaker, on my thoughts to speaking to a resolution on a Monday night. Now, I gotta say, I think it was great in a way that the backbenchers of the NDP had the opportunity to speak. Because, I mean, we don't hear from the member from Kings North very often. I think it was a great opportunity for him to come up and speak tonight and to bring up the issue of cap sites in this House on the back of a resolution that's presented when this government should be presenting government business that we can all discuss, bills and laws and regulations, things that are important to Nova Scotians. How about talking about things that are important like jobs? How about things that are talking about power rates? How about things that are talking about taxes? Those are the things that this House should be used for, not frivolous resolutions on the floor of this thing. Let me speak quickly to cap sites for a minute before I go on to other discussions that I think we should be talking about in this House of Assembly. We have a wonderful cap site in the Musée Acadien de Pubnico West. A beautiful cap site that's been used for years since they put it in. It has helped out hundreds of people. Do I think it should stay there? Absolutely, Madam Speaker. Do I think it should be there? The one in Tuscan at the Centre Communautaire. Do I think that one should be there? Absolutely, Madam Speaker. And you know what? I took the opportunity to talk to my MP. I took the opportunity to send a few emails around. And Madam Speaker, that's the job that I, as an MLA, can do. Maybe they don't feel that they can do those kinds of things, but they have the opportunity to talk to MPs across this province from one end to another. I'm sure they could talk to MP Megan Leslie. Maybe they could talk to Scott Bryson. Maybe they can talk about all these individuals that, Peter Stouffer, exactly. These are all MPs, or how about their own new leader, Mr. Mulclair? They could talk to him. There's lots of things that they can do rather than bring it to the floor of this legislature to talk about a resolution. Madam Speaker, I have been here walking these halls since 1999. I have never seen government, except for our Wednesday nights in late debate, call one of their resolutions. This is the first time I've ever seen it. So what is wrong here? Why is this here tonight? It's because they don't have anything important to talk about tonight. So the people watching on TV tonight can understand maybe why I'm upset. I have constituents in Argyll that need to meet with their MLA. I had the opportunity to meet with a few of them this morning, but I had to get on the road to be here at 4 o'clock to do the business of this House of Assembly. And to know that within less than an hour into that procedure, less than an hour in, we call a resolution, a government resolution to debate cap sites. Once again, I'm not diminishing the issue of cap sites. I think they are important, and I think it's one that we should work towards making sure that they stay in areas of Nova Scotia. But what we should be talking about, and what the member for Kings North should be talking about, are the jobs that have been lost in the Annapolis Valley. You know what, Madam Speaker? Since this government has taken government, the Valley has lost 5,800 jobs. 5,800 jobs. Why isn't the member talking about that? Why isn't he talking within his party to find more opportunities for people in the Valley? That's what we should be talking about, the Florida Legislature, Madam Speaker. If they're really concerned, I think if the government was really concerned about rural Nova Scotia, they'd be doing something to stop the bleeding. To stop the bleeding, Madam Speaker. Under the NDP, this government has lost 21,000 full-time jobs. Why aren't we talking about that issue on the floor? The Minister of Finance is speaking over there. Why doesn't he get up and talk? He knows there's job losses in Nova Scotia. He knows there's job losses in Nova Scotia. I want him to tell me how many jobs. If it's not 21,000 jobs, why doesn't he tell me how many jobs have actually been lost in Nova Scotia? Because it's not anything less than zero. It's a heck of a lot more than zero. Is it 10,000 jobs? Is it 15,000 jobs? You know what? It's got to be more than 18,000 jobs. Why doesn't he talk about those things? This is what this government wanted to bring. And the government House Leader, the Assistant Government House Leader, brought this resolution forward. And we can talk about it until the end of the evening if he wants. I'm sure there's lots of great ideas that we want to be talking about in resolutions. But again, there's been job losses from one end of this province to the other. Madam Speaker, if he wants to get up and speak, I'll let him take some time. He wants to take some time. If he looks at Southwest Nova Scotia, how many jobs in Southwest Nova Scotia? How many jobs in Yarmouth County has there been lost? How many jobs in Shelburne County have been lost? How many jobs in Digby County has been lost? How many jobs in Annapolis County have been lost? How many jobs in Kings County has been lost? How many jobs in Colchester? Cumberland South? Which county do you want me to talk about? All right, great. Here in HRM, they've gotten jobs. Wonderful. I'm glad things are going well.
Just remind the member to be speaking to the Speaker. The Honourable Member for Argyll.
I apologize, but he's given me so much to talk about. He's given me so much to talk about that it's hard not to fall into that kind of rabbit track to once again tell the member why he's wrong in this particular case. Maybe the overall number looks rosy to him, but when we see the regional disparity that's happening in this province, where there are jobs missing, jobs and not just jobs. It's not just the jobs, Madam Speaker, that we're missing. It's the people. It's the people, in my estimation, that made our community strong. We don't have them anymore because they had to move on to other places. Maybe they're here in HRM, and I'm glad they were able to remain in Nova Scotia. But I know they're not here either. They're in Alberta, they're in Ontario, they're in other provinces in this country and other places abroad. And I think that is a shame, because that's the kind of things that we should be talking about on the floor of this legislature, Madam Speaker. You know, it's funny, and again, to go to the job issue, you know, this government took over at the end of a recession. And since that time, the employment rate is 1.9% lower than when they took power. Places like South Shore have seen unemployment rates drop by 5.8% since this government took power. So why don't we find a nice resolution to talk about those kind of things? You know why? Because this government really doesn't want to talk about it. they don't realize. Maybe they don't go out and talk to the people that we talk to. But you know what? I think it's going to continue to show. And I'm going to bring back a line that maybe the member for Cape Breton, no, the previous member for Cape Breton North, and I apologize to the current member, used on many, many times. It's time that this failed socialist experiment ends. It's time we start listening to Nova Scotians for once, rather than just sort of flying by the seat of your pants, making things up, and hoping that people are going to buy the baloney that you've made up. Madam Speaker, I think there's a lot of things that we should be talking about. Once again, I thank the member for Kings North for bringing this to the floor of legislature, because it gives me an opportunity to talk about the ineffectiveness of this government. And at this time, I'll take my place and I'll adjourn debate on this resolution.
I recognize the Honourable Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, please call resolution number 752, Fortress Lewisburg.
Before we move on to new business, we should adjourn debate. A motion on the needs to be on the floor to adjourn debate on resolution 953. The motion is for adjournment of debate on resolution 953. All in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is carried. Recognize the Honourable Deputy Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Please call resolution number 752, Fortress Lewisburg funding cuts.
Now call resolution number 752. Recognize the Honourable Member for Lunenburg.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I'd like to read my resolution, which says, whereas Nova Scotia is honoured to be the home of many historic sites such as Fortress Lewisburg, which was rebuilt to interpret and maintain historic presence of this important French settlement and military installation, and whereas Fortress Lewisburg National Historic Site employs hundreds of local residents as tour guides, interpreters, archaeologists, carpenters, engineers, and those who provide jobs vital for investment in the town of Lewisburg and also the surrounding rural community. And whereas the federal government has recently announced that 1,689 employees of Parks Canada will be affected by the $5.2 billion job strategy, and the 120 positions specifically at Fort Lewisburg will be eliminated or face reduction of hours. Therefore, be it resolved that this House of Assembly encourage the members of Cape Breton West to contact his colleagues within the Federal Conservative Party to stress the importance of the job losses in Fortress Lewisburg and the impact that that loss will have on the rural area. So, Madam Speaker, this obviously is going to be have a devastating effect on the area. Federal cuts that will look at eliminating 10 jobs and reducing the hours of 120 jobs in a town of 1,265 people is really going to have an impact. We know that Fortress Lewisburg is such an important historic park and one that is the flagship in Canadian park systems. The town is right next to the park, and people drive through the town with their shops and B&Bs and bakeries, and all of these people will be affected in a negative way. Local restaurants, gift shops, hotels will be affected by a shorter season. The danger, of course, for most of these seasonal workers, if their time is cut back, they very well may not be able to qualify for employment insurance, which will be another huge factor in the area. Madam Speaker, I realize that Fortress Lewisburg is historically a destination where people come from all over the world, certainly all over Canada. And I remember in the 1960s when the restoration first began, I was a young girl, and my mother and father and brother and I packed up our car for our family vacation and went to Lewisburg. And at the time, there were very few buildings. They were actually just using all sorts of string and marking it all out to show where the buildings would go. Over the years, people have been brought in from all over the world to work on this historic reproduction, and it has drawn people who are interested in historic reenactments and just to see what the world was like in the 1700s. The buildings themselves are so beautiful, and I know that some of them, like the one of the biggest buildings, the King's pardon me? Bastion, thank you. At the time when it was built, was one of the biggest buildings in North America. And I know families and individuals, but also school trips are one of those magical things that happens when people go to Louisbourg. I have a friend who had a wonderful experience when she went there with a school trip. And she was telling me the way it all worked, and she said, I remember getting off my school bus and walking into the interpretive center with my classmates. We watched short videos about the history, which built the excitement of our day trip. Then we boarded the fortress bus because vehicles were not allowed to go to the fortress. This helps preserve the landscape, which is full of shrubs and wetlands and grassy hills. I do understand that apparently these buses will be eliminated, so people will be driving now right to the fort. And so that will also be a questionable impact in a negative way on this area that they're talking about. She went on to say that when they got to the fortress, they got off the bus, and before they entered a traditional 1744 house, they were just amazed. Madam Speaker, she said the roof was made of grass and dirt, the floor was also dirt, and the woman in the house was cooking with an open flame, washing clothes in a bucket. She was dressed in and appeared to be warm dress and with an apron and a hat. The animator who was playing the husband was chopping wood outside. The beds were very, very small, made of blankets covering over hay. So when she went to this area and looked at all of this, these people that would be the interpreters in these buildings now, a lot of these jobs will be cut back in hours and some eliminated entirely. She was talking about how the magic of this place affected her. She said, once the gates of the fortress and the animator playing the guard told us the story of how the English invaded. She said she was talking about how the interpreter who was playing the guard said they all had to say a French word, which was a password to let them into the fortress. And once inside, she said she felt as if she had gone back in time. This sort of magical experience that my friend had is one of the reasons that this is just such an amazing spot. This park and all that it does for the local area's economy, but not just that. It's what kind of impact does it have on someone's life? If you, in our world right now, we were speaking earlier about cap sites and internet sites and people being involved in our fast modern world, and to be able to go to a place like Fortress Louisbourg, step back into time, look at the way they did things. This is all so wonderful for people to actually see where we've progressed as a society, and have we actually progressed. I know that food is one of the wonderful things at Fortress Louisbourg that people come away talking about, having a gastronomic memory of their visit. They talk about wonderful breads that are cooked right there, and hard-crusted breads, and wonderful stews, and the kinds of food that they would have had at the time. Very, very different from our over-processed non-food that most of us are eating these days, Madam Speaker. I know that as visitors come each year to the fortress, they explore it in different ways. Through the process of the restoration, archaeological students would go in the summers and work there. And it was an amazing treat for them to go and see what they could do and how they could be part of this wild restoration. That it was a project at the time. When it started in the 60s, I remember people were shaking their heads saying, what kind of a crazy thing is this to do? But obviously it was absolutely a wonderful investment. I went back to Fortress Louisbourg in the late 70s, mid-70s, my second honeymoon, and saw a lot of progress at that point. Many buildings were built at that point, and it was really quite a wonderful thing. changed very considerably from the 60s, where it was mostly an open field. And I remember when I was there in the 60s with my family, it was a magical kind of day. It was very thick fog, and it felt much like it would have to the soldiers at the time. There are all the restorations that have happened involve so many people. All the clothing that they wear is made in the area. There are the whole town too. The area is involved in the spring when the park opens. The town springs to life, and young children act as volunteers. They volunteer as dressing in the old clothes as children of the time. They would play with balls and rocks and make instruments of their own creation and play the way children would have at that time. Very, very different, and a wonderful thing for whole families in the area to be able to be involved in the economy. Madam Speaker, to cut jobs like this in an area that is so small really will have major economic effects on Lewisburg. And I know that a lot of the people in the area right now are just sort of shuffling about, seeing what is really going to happen. How long will the season actually be? These things have to be nailed down so that know actually what impacts there will be further than what they already do expect. Also, in Parks Canada regional headquarters in Upper Water Street in Halifax, those jobs also will be heavily slashed. Apparently, there'll be 34 employees gone at that location as well. So it's a far-reaching and deep cuts, and I think the people of Lewisburg, they're a resilient bunch. They're Nova Scotians. We're all a resilient group of people, and we'll deal with what is dealt to us. And yet, I certainly do hope that we can all encourage the federal party to look at not cutting any further jobs and looking at the real devastation that these cuts have impacted. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton South.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. I'd like to thank the member from Lunenburg for taking us down memory lane with Lewisburg, and it's interesting that that the NDP is so devoid of business in this House that they have to have the member from Lunenburg talk about the situation in Cape Breton West. You know, and I would, while I respected everything the member said, I think my friend from Cape Breton West will have something further to say about Lewisburg, I'm sure, about that. But you know, Madam Speaker, I'm glad the subject has hit the floor in regards to Lewisburg, because there are certain things happening at Lewisburg that I don't like, and there are certain things happening to our economy, and I would hope that the Minister of Tourism, who is in the House, would pay attention to some of the suggestions that we may have here. And if there's one word that's missing when it comes to that great icon in Cape Breton, it's marketing. And I can tell you, Madam Speaker, that if there's anything we need is a marketing strategy for Fortress Lewisburg and for the future. Lewisburg, Madam Speaker, should be a thriving town today. It should be something like some of the American places where their history, they've made money off of history as well as preserved some of the legacy of history. They've also made money, and one place comes to mind that, in my opinion, doesn't have half the historical significance of Fort Lewisburg, but it's the Alamo, for example, in the States. And there are millions of people visit the Alamo every year, and the United States tourism people in that part of the country do very well off it. And I've said, Madam Speaker, many times, for anybody that would listen to me wherever I was at, is in Cape Breton, what we need to do is, and while I respect Parks Canada and the archaeological features that are out there and the historical implications, I humbly suggest that what we need to be doing with Lewisburg is selling, not digging up rocks, but selling them. You know, and I think that what we have to do is market that for the future. It's something that's sitting there. It's a national, or if not an international, icon that is terribly unused, Madam Speaker. It's terribly unused. It needs, in conjunction with Parks Canada, it needs a strategy from Parks Canada beef up their ranks, and I agree with the member from Lunenburg who laments the fact that some people working for Parks Canada are being laid off. But I suggest they should be rehired, and I suggest with a different purpose. We should be hiring them to go out and start encouraging the private sector. If the government doesn't want to do it, then the private sector should do it in marketing Louisbourg, and that goes, for example, for the Highlands. It goes for the Bell Museum in Quebec. It goes for all our important icons that could, in and of themselves, could make the economy of Cape Breton one heck of a lot better than it is right now. Because I don't think there's any place anywhere that has the kind of historical significance that Cape Breton Island has when it comes to the Bell and everything that went along. What did they say about Quebec? Quebec is the equivalent, I guess, of Bar Harbor, Maine, in terms of its importance. But the problem with Quebec is that it's 2 months of the year. And what we have to do is encourage more people to go to Bell Museum, to see the Bell exhibit. If anybody on the other side of the house, or even on this side, has not been to the Bell Museum, I suggest that you should take a trip down there and see the exhibits that are there with Alexander Graham Bell. You mentioned the telephone, of course, and the early flights that took place on Quebec Bay. You know, and when you go to Louisbourg, the historical significance of the battles that used to take place and the falling of the fort, and then the French versus the English firing cannons at one another. You know, we should be still doing that every Friday out there in season. We should have people coming to these battles. You could even get the member from Richmond and I to coach each team. You know, but seriously, Madam Speaker, seriously, Fort Louisbourg is a national historic site. And I can recall, Madam Speaker, just to digress for a moment about the Highlands, also in Cape Breton, and in the riding of Inverness and Victoria, I guess, or both, probably. But anyway, I've never seen much publicity, great publicity about a golf course that the Highlands has. And it's reached Condé Nast magazine, it's reached national golf productions, all of this kind of stuff. But you know what? A few years ago, the marketing was so slow down there that we were in danger of probably losing it, because as losing interest from people coming from away, because you couldn't even get a golf cart there for years. And the days of the caddy were gone, so you had to truck your own clubs around that course. And if anybody's tried to do that over the few years, they better be in better shape than I was at the time. So, but anyway, the difficulty is that it was inside Parks Canada property. And one of the things that used to infuriate me back, by the way, when I was Minister of Development and taking people down there to look at some facilities there, I would take them in the park, and while we were playing golf, somebody would ticket our cars. You know, because you had to go through a certain way to get into the park, and while you were paying green fees, somebody was putting a ticket on your car. So that wasn't good marketing strategy for the Americans over there, that's for sure. But anyway, I suggest that Parks Canada, while they're a very important part of the federal scene, I think they should be turning their attention, Madam Speaker, to marketing in Cape Breton, and I give those 3 examples. And I really thank the member from Lunenburg for talking about Louisbourg and suggesting that what a wonderful trip she had down there, and the honeymoon, I believe she said, was, and I couldn't think of a better place than Louisbourg. The weather's always so good there. My good friend from Cape Breton West will attest to that. But I can recall, though, Madam Speaker, I can recall being frustrated from time to time at knowing that what a wonderful icon we have there, and it's not being marketed. And I see nothing wrong. I see nothing wrong with the provincial minister talking to his federal counterparts or the Parks Canada people about perhaps encouraging, Madam Speaker, a private sector company such as Disney or one of those to come into Cape Breton and take a look at that icon we have there, and perhaps get involved it's something that I think could make or remake, I guess, the town of Louisbourg, a town that is no longer a town. One person out there said it's an occupied town. Now I forget, McDonald, gentleman, Alistair McDonald, that's right. And I don't even think they have a gas station out there anymore in the town. You know, and that's terrible with the national icon sitting in its midst. So, and the reason is that there's no traffic there. I've gone out, I've taken some people out to Louisbourg and there's nobody there. You know, I mean, they have buses going down to take you down to the fort, and the buses were empty more than they're filled. And the season is so short, but there's something missing when that's allowed to happen in a national historic icon like Fort Louisbourg. So I suggest it's unsolicited ask, I guess, from the provincial minister that perhaps the provincial government and with the help of hopefully all three parties could talk to federal officials and federal ministers regarding a future strategy for Fort Louisbourg and the other two icons in Cape Breton that I talked about. Particularly Louisbourg, I think that area of Cape Breton could get quite a shot in the arm if we had a rejuvenated facility there, something that people would talk about, go back and talk to their people in the United States or in Britain or wherever they're coming over, the tourists, to visit these historic sites. And I believe that there's certainly enough animators around Cape Breton that could probably have a role to play in doing something with marketing in the future. But I'm going to take my place in a moment, Madam Speaker. But I would very seriously say that I think the time has come for us to forget about the status quo as it comes to Louisbourg and to get into a marketing situation there that will bring that facility back to what I think it deserves. It will be a huge employer in the area, and I believe it would breathe new life into Louisbourg and the surrounding areas, and indeed the whole province of Nova Scotia. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Thank you. Now recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton West.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I'm pleased to be able to stand today and say a few words about the resolution from the member from Lunenburg regarding the Fortress of Louisbourg. Her resolution is the most information that we've heard from that government on the Fortress of Louisbourg since I've been here. Madam Speaker, I actually worked as a soldier in the Fortress of Louisbourg. I spent some time there. I want to qualify that and let you know it wasn't at the original time, it was in later years. But Madam Speaker, there's no question that the Fortress of Louisbourg is a very important icon in the province of Nova Scotia. And Madam Speaker, you know, it has created a lot of employment for a lot of people over the years. As a matter of fact, my father-in-law worked at the Fortress of Louisbourg for over 25 years, and he was a hewer. He took round logs and he changed them into square building beams, and they used them in the recreation of the building. So there's been a lot of activity and a lot of closeness in the Fortress of Louisbourg in our household, and it's very important when you think about what it was done. And if we go back in history, when we look at the fact that it was started by the Diefenbaker government as a way to find employment for miners who were losing their jobs in the coal mines of Cape Breton at the time, and it was meant as a reason to improve what was going on, and so people would know part of our history. Those things have taken place, and I heard the member from Lunenburg talk about there might be some challenges with people actually driving over to the Fortress instead of taking the buses. Well, the roads going to the Fortress are quite good. They're excellent, first-class roads, and nobody will be going into the different areas where there is still some archaeological issues that we're looking after. The Fortress also has been very important for a lot of young people in the province of Nova Scotia, not just on Cape Breton Island, but from all over. They come and they have a kids volunteer program. They get to live work in the site and act as drummers and pipers and do other types of things all around the site and get a real sense of what the history of the Fortress of Louisbourg was all about. The work and the number of people employed, they're not just from Louisbourg, Madam Speaker. They're from all over the island. There's people there from all over the island. Now, I don't know if the member from Lunenburg spoke to the superintendent, but on May the 2nd, when the announcement was made, I did speak to the superintendent. And there are no layoffs. There are 10 people or a number of positions where there's retirements, but there are no layoffs. There is reduction in hours, but in those reduction in hours, they have made sure that the seasonal workers will get at least 16 weeks, which currently would have qualified them for unemployment. So those things were taken into consideration. Was it an easy decision? I'm sure it wasn't. But I do know that they worked at it. And if you're a person that had a 12-month job and you're going back to a 7-month job, that's not easy either, because your life has been determined on 12 months of salary. So there are some concerns from the community. But for the member to say that there were job losses, I don't think that's correct, and that may be because you never got the proper information, and that happens easy enough in our business, and we all know that. But what I really think, when the member from Cape Breton South, he spoke about marketing. Well, one of the first things I did on May the 2nd is I actually wrote a letter to the federal minister. And I'm hoping that our provincial tourism minister did the same thing. But I wrote a letter to our federal minister asking him to reconsider the cuts at the Fortress Louisbourg. And if he couldn't reconsider those cuts, at the very least, invest more money in marketing. Because I, like the member from Cape Breton South, and many people on Cape Breton Island will tell you that the marketing for that fortress is poor. It is very poor. I remember watching as a kid advertisements on TV, and they'd show the fortress, and and there was even TVs then. The member from Glace Bay was wondering if there was a fortress in. Well, he would have been one of the ones. No. But Madam Speaker, they used to advertise that there would be a picture of the fortress and it's foggy and rainy, and they were playing this eerie music that you'd hear in a funeral home, and they were saying, "Come to Louisbourg." Well, it wasn't a great incentive. It wasn't a great incentive. I'm sure it wasn't an ad like that got the member from Lunenburg there on her honeymoon. But, Madam Speaker, we do need to improve how we sell the icon of North America. You know, at one point, it was the biggest recreation in all of North America. Now it's the biggest recreation of a historic site in Canada. We haven't been marketing it well. And I don't believe that the province of Nova Scotia has been doing a good job of marketing it either. And they'll say, well, you know, it's a federal site. Well, everybody that comes into Nova Scotia is helping our economy. And if we have an icon like the Fortress of Louisbourg that we can take advantage of on the #1 island in North America, which again we should be taking advantage of as the Minister of Tourism, and the 3rd most beautiful island in all the world, and we're not taking advantage of those things that are given to us simple and easy, that don't cost us any money, the provincial government is failing.
Well, the advertising they do.
They love to advertise. Well, now, Madam Speaker, here's an opportunity to promote a product. Here's an opportunity to promote a product. The problem that seems to be from that side of the House, Madam Speaker, is that they don't have any initiative. They don't know how to be leaders. They have been in opposition for 11 years, one of the members mentioned the other day. 11 years in opposition, and now they're studying to get back into opposition with the way they're acting towards some of the most important things in this province. We are sitting here today, and I can't believe that we're debating resolutions in business hours of the House of Assembly. We have the highest power rates in all of Canada. We have higher taxes than anywhere else. We've got Bill 102 that this government put into place. The member, again, the Minister for Agriculture has all the answers except during question period. During question period, he's void of answers. He hasn't got a clue what to say. But, Madam Speaker, the reality is, here we are today talking about a very important institution in the Fortress of Louisbourg, but there are many other things that people around home are talking about. The member from Lunenburg talked about the restaurants and the gift shops and the hotels in Louisbourg and how they're struggling to keep their doors open. They're also struggling because of the power rates that are being charged, because of the extra 2% on the HST that this government put in place. They're struggling to keep their doors open and to keep people working because it is very expensive to do work in the province of Nova Scotia, Madam Speaker. a province that only had 0.3% growth in the GDP. This is the same government, Madam Speaker, that cut the funding to the ferry in Yarmouth. And you would say to me, well, what does that got to do with the Fortress of Louisbourg? Do you know that 40% of the the bus traffic that came to Cape Breton came across that ferry? They would have been going to visit the Fortress of Louisbourg, but that government decided, no, we're not going to bother doing that anymore. Madam Speaker, I could go on for a long time, and most of the people here understand and know that. But here we are. Excuse me, somebody called me stupid?
Somebody did.
That's what I heard over here.
Oh, yeah.
Well, you know what, Madam Speaker? I might be a lot of things, but I will tell you, when it comes to talking about something as important as the Fortress of Louisbourg, as important to this economy of the province of Nova Scotia, I don't care what people call me. What I do care about is the fact that the Minister of Tourism of the province of Nova Scotia is not doing his share to keep this open. The Minister of Tourism here should be not writing letters, if he even did that. He should be in Ottawa talking to the federal minister, talking to his counterpart, and telling them how important it is. That would be what I would do if I was in his position. It didn't take me 2 days or 2 weeks or 3 weeks to do a resolution about it. I wrote on the day that it happened to the federal minister to express my concerns and talk to people in Ottawa who have an ability to talk to those people. And that's what the resolution asked me to do. But I was ahead of the resolution. I was ahead of the resolution. Because, Madam Speaker, I do care about what happens to the Fortress of Louisbourg. I do care about what happens to the people that are working there. And I do care what happens to all of Nova Scotia when we have no vision or strategy from the Minister of Tourism. When you ask the Minister of Tourism during debate, budget estimates, what's your strategy for Cape Breton? Well, we got the Tours and Dreamers Guide. Well, yeah, we do. We have the Tours and Dreamers Guide. When I ask him what is it, what his plan is, simple thing like when you get onto the island of Cape Breton, a sign that would say, "Welcome to the #1 island in North America." Where could you get that kind of advertising? For nothing. But we don't have that advertising yet. I'm hopeful that if the Minister of Tourism won't do it, that the Minister of Transportation will put it right across the top of the bridge at the causeway. Welcome to the #1 island in North America, because that's where we should be. Instead of paying hundreds of thousands of dollars to PR firms, we should be doing and utilizing the things that we have free. The #1 island, the #1 historic site in Canada, those are things that we should be building on, not taking for granted. Those are things that we need to move forward with. Although there are other things that are important that we should be debating in this House, the very fact that the member from Lunenburg believed that this was important and it gave us an opportunity to talk about such an important icon in our economy and in our historic background, I thank her for that. I give her full marks for bringing it forward. You know, Madam Speaker, I have to say there's so much more we should be talking about in this House. We should be talking about all the other things that could create employment on the island of Cape Breton and other parts of Nova Scotia. But most of all, Madam Speaker, we should be taking advantage of the things that are given to us, easily handed to us, like the #1 island, like the #1 North American historic site. Those are the kinds of things we should be doing. We should also be talking about the other issues that this government doesn't seem to have the stomach or the fortitude to speak to. Real business besides that if it's affecting the province of Nova Scotia. The Fortress of Louisbourg and what's taking place there, that is real business, and those people are concerned, and we've been talking with them. But there are other issues that we need to move on. We need this government to take action and speak to the federal government, as we will as a caucus and as I'm sure others will in their particular caucus. Madam Speaker, I'm going to take my place now. I want to thank you for the opportunity to speak here, and I would move that we adjourn debate.
There's a motion on the motion has been to adjourn debate.
Madam Speaker, I would.
The Honourable, no. There has been a motion on the floor to adjourn debate on Resolution 752. Is the House ready for the question? All in favour say aye. Those opposed, nay. The motion is defeated. I now recognize the honourable member for Pictou East.
Madam Speaker, I can't believe the mixed message that we were getting from the opposite side of the House. How important, how very important Fortress Louisbourg is, but we shouldn't be talking about it in this House. That was the message that I was getting from the other side. And I want to speak, Madam Speaker, about Louisbourg, because I have more invested in the town of Louisbourg than anyone in this House. I have been a taxpayer in Louisbourg since 2000. For over 12 years, I have been a taxpayer in Louisbourg. And I know more about the fortress of Louisbourg and its value to that community than anyone else in the House. Now, let me explain, if I could.
Order. The honourable member for Pictou East.
Madam Speaker, what I didn't really intend to speak on this, but what really got me upset was my good friend, the member for Cape Breton West. I lived in that constituency. I know him well. I like him a lot. But I can't believe that he is an apologist for the Harper government. I just can't believe it. Because that is what he was doing in his remarks. He was saying that there were no job losses. That there were no job losses.
Order. Order. Order, please. Now recognize the honourable member for Pictou East.
Instead of taking the Harper government to task for the cuts, tried to transfer the blame to the provincial minister responsible for tourism. And that is not fair. That is not fair. I used to think that there were some Conservatives who were progressive. I don't think there is anything such as a progressive Conservative anymore. Now, Madam Speaker, let me talk about Louisbourg. I just wish the opposition parties would allow me to talk about a community that is very close to my heart. I still own property there in Louisbourg, and I was the president of the Tourism Association, the District 1 Tourism Association, which covered an area from Manitou to Gabaroos. Now, the member from Cape Breton West knows the geography there. And when I got involved with that association, there were 7 tourist operators involved with it. We got the number up to 40. We had 40 tourist operators involved there. And, you know, the Conservatives and the Liberals have this ability to throw out percentages without any foundation whatsoever. 40%, we heard that 40% of those going to Fortress Louisbourg had come over on the, my understanding was that about 40% came on the ferry. Okay, well, Madam Speaker, I'll look at Hansard when it comes out. However, Madam Speaker, my wife, Mary Kay, and I had 500 guests a year in a bed and breakfast, on Main Street, Louisbourg. And I was involved in working with fish plants and other things up there. However, we operated that bed and breakfast for 5 years with about 500 guests a year. So I think I know the destination of the people that came to visit the fortress. We had a great cross-section. Madam Speaker, you know, we're dealing with cuts at Fortress Louisbourg, but this isn't the first time the Conservatives have done damage to that community, because I remember the cuts that took place in the past under a couple of different governments when the times were cut down, when the times were reduced, and there was a tremendous impact on the business that we operated and the other businesses in the area. Every time you took an hour off the time frame for the operation of that fortress, there was a detrimental effect, because people would actually drive through town as the hours got more limited in the evenings. And that happened a number of times, and I don't remember any of the Conservatives or Liberals standing up for those cuts either. They were cuts that had an impact, a major impact on that community. Sure, somebody has to be a champion for Cape Breton. You know, I'm being heckled from over there. I love Cape Breton. I love Cape Breton. It is a #1 island.
Order, please. Order. I can't hear the member that's talking. I'd appreciate if we could keep it down a little bit. The honourable member for Pictou East has the floor.
The member for Cape Breton West was saying he'd love to have me back, but I might have to go there to visit him after the next election. After the next election. Madam Speaker, I don't know why I have them wound up here. I'm just speaking a couple words from the heart. Now, one of the things that Fortress Louisbourg should have done and never did, and there are great people that work at the Fortress in management and also all of the staff, I know and respect all of them. I know most of the ones who work at the Fortress. I've been there many times. Even went last year. However, what we have to do with Fortress Louisbourg is not blame the provincial minister. There has to be fundamental changes within the Fortress. The Fortress and its involvement with the community. The community was consulted a number of years ago. There was a deep consultation process, and I remember being involved in that process and attending a lot of meetings. And there was the feeling that there would be the involvement of the community. And I suggested things like having some of those dressed in costume, in period costume, being piped through the main street at various times, once a day perhaps. Things like that, where the fortress actually came out into the community, where there were some people from the fortress actually into the community. And there was never, ever an approach that got the community involved. There has to be a tying in, and that tying in has to take place within the community. It can't be people in Ottawa dictating to the fortress folks how things are going to unfold. And when we become apologists for the Harper government, it is most annoying, most annoying. So I believe we have to get the community involved, that we have to really stand up to Ottawa, and that has to be more than one letter being written. It has to be a real involvement from the community. And we on this side of the House are very, very concerned, and we, Madam Speaker, will now adjourn debate on this issue. Thank you very much. I'm very pleased to have had the opportunity to speak for a couple of moments on something very dear to my heart. Thank you.
He moved. Recognize the honourable member for Richmond.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for the opportunity to say a few words on Resolution 752. Allow me to say that while we're all concerned about trying to find new employment opportunities for Louisbourg and all of Cape Breton, may I suggest we may want to make work project to build a statue or a monument to the member for Pictou East, because you know, Mr. Speaker, for anyone to stand in this House and to self-proclaim that they've done more than anyone else, I think is a bit disingenuous, to say the least. And when people talk about playing politics, I don't think there's a better example of that than what we just heard from the member for Pictou East. And what's ironic is that when you listen to how he's saying writing a letter is not enough, standing in the House is not enough, I'm wondering what his Minister of Fisheries is thinking while he's saying that, because while he stands in the House and talks about the owner-operator policy that cuts DEI and his concerns, when we said let's have an all-party delegation go to Ottawa and deliver the message in person, we're still waiting for the phone call from that minister. So may I suggest to you, Mr. Speaker, that this government's bark is much worse than its bite, because they seem to be more than happy to be in their little safe place here in the legislature to throw shots out and say how concerned they are, but when it comes to taking real action, we see something completely different from this government. And let me give an example. I know they've mentioned the Minister of Tourism, and allow me to help him out as well, because when you're talking about how the cuts affect the museum and the fortress over in Louisbourg, maybe the member from Pictou East and the member from Lunenburg also want to talk to the Minister of Tourism to see what the devastating impact that this government's cuts to the student employment program is having on community museums throughout this province. When we left office, and I know the Minister of Finance